Welcome to Wildlife Wonders. I'm Jane.
And I'm James.
And we're here today to talk to you. This is our first episode, and we're very excited about it. And thank you guys for coming and listening. I guess you didn't come here because, well, technically you had to go to a website of some kind. But anyway, very excited to be here talking to you and so excited that you chose to listen. And today we're going to talk about probably the most common question we get, and it's what to do if you find orphan wildlife.
Especially during baby season, we get 100 calls a day about finding baby animals.
Everything under the sun, and people just don't know what they should do, you know, when they should step in and when they shouldn't. And the more people we can educate about it, the more lives we can save. Because some people are trying to help and they do things that make the animal just unsavable. And it's simple things. But so I think we can start with what generally we see what causes the orphans during baby season. And I feel like, you know, it's February when this will air. And so the first thing I usually see a lot of is trees being cut down. We lose babies because, you know, they lose mom or they were displaced in some way. Large squirrels are making nests in car engines.
Yeah.
Every year, especially when it's cold out, they're making the nests in car engines. Parents get killed from one way or another, or they even abandon the baby sometimes. Like so we've had them intentionally abandon a baby. Sometimes we could not find out what was wrong with it, and sometimes you find out later that there's something wrong with the baby that it's crazy that mom knew that early on.
Yeah, she can sense it.
Yeah,
but, yeah.
It's insane without X-rays or anything. She's like bad heart on this one. So, and they're cruel. They'll just shove them out of the nest. You're like, good luck to you. So,
no Parent of the Year awards for them.
No. I guess they don't have time to mess around. Maybe the den's too small and they had one too many babies. It's really weird. It's weird, but so lots of different reasons why they could be orphaned. But I think the first thing we want to do is clarify if they are an orphan or not, because sometimes people might see an animal and assume that it's an orphan because they don't see a parent nearby when what their behavior is perfectly normal.
Yep.
Like a baby porcupine at the bottom of a tree is very normal because mom will go up to forage, baby will wait for mom. So that's something where if you see one by itself, it's probably fine. You can wait a few hours to see if it's still there or keep distance for a while, but it's not an unnormal thing to see a baby porcupine by itself. Whereas if we're talking about a baby skunk, then they're usually following mom all the time. But it depends on the species. But there's definitely such thing as kidnapping.
Yes, the dreaded kidnapping.
Yes, the frequent kidnapping.
Yeah. To avoid kidnapping, what do you think is the best way to go about it?
I think observe and wait. Just wait before you interact. If you see an animal that you feel is an orphan, just observe from a far away distance at first and just see what we're looking at. Does the baby look healthy otherwise? Or does it have flies all around it? Is it bleeding? Sometimes it just fell out of the nest and mom's going to come grab it. It could be a series of situations. So if the baby looks otherwise healthy, just monitoring from a distance and seeing if we hear mom or see mom anywhere close by is generally a good idea. Unless we're talking about baby possums.
Yes.
Or baby chipmunks. Because a baby chipmunk that is out of the den they're not supposed to be out of the den until they're much older. So usually mom's not coming back. If they've made it all the way out of the den, something's wrong. And reuniting is like near impossible because you have no idea where in the hole they're supposed to be. And then mama possums aren't the best moms. You know, if the babies fall off of them, usually they'll just keep going. So trying to reunite, she's not going to be like, oh my gosh, number 13 fell off. Let me go find him. So chipmunks or possums, you're usually good. But anything else, I would observe. I would observe and wait and see. And, you know, what do we know about that particular animal? Definitely calling a wildlife rehabber, too, to get more specific advice on that particular species. Because we can give some basic advice here, but every species is different, too. So we can't tell you exactly what to do in every situation. But we can arm you with some info. That'll be helpful in a lot of situations.
Yeah. My favorite thing is when people reach out and they have pictures of the baby.
Yes.
A picture's worth 1,000 words, and you can tell so much just from looking at a picture that you won't be able to get just from somebody trying to explain it to you.
Exactly. I totally agree with that. Thank God for the invention of phones.
Yeah.
Well, the iPhone or the Android. Like, it's been crazy sometimes when someone will tell me about an animal and they send me a picture. I'm like, oh, that's actually not a baby.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of people think that skunks are bigger than they are. So when they see a real skunk, they're like, that's a baby.
Yeah.
I'm like, no, it's full-fledged adult. Do not get close. Do not try to rescue it. It's perfectly fine, you know? And a lot of foxes are bigger than people think they are.
Yeah.
Like your average fox, we get them all the time. They're 4 kilos, which is like 8 to 10 pounds.
Yep.
They're the size of a house cat, really, as far as weight's concerned.
Yeah.
So people
They're
will
just
see
bushy.
one. Yeah, they're bushy. They have so much fur. But people will see one and be like, oh my God, there's a baby fox all by itself. And I'm like, it's an adult. It's living its best life.
Yep.
Leave it be. But then beavers, everyone thinks they're smaller than they are in real life, you know? So I had a lady call me about a beaver last year that was a baby because you're an adult beaver's 40 to 60 pounds, you know?
Right.
A 1 pound, 5 pound beaver is a baby.
Yeah.
So it's interesting how it changes based on what people will know. So the pictures are so helpful because I can be like, oh, no, that's not a beaver, that's a muskrat, or
Right. Yeah.
something like that. It's definitely helpful. But so we don't want to kidnap these animals. We don't want to pull them away if there's a chance that mom can get them. So we always want to try, if it's possible, to reunite.
Right.
And so observing from a distance and watching and seeing. With squirrels, usually we'll say, don't leave the baby out overnight because mom's not going to come get them at night. So if you can wait all day, that's great. But then if you have a nocturnal animal, you might want to wait at night, like a baby raccoon or something like that. So it depends on that sort of thing. But if you do end up containing the baby, if you have confirmed it's an orphan, or at least you haven't seen the parents in 12, 24 hours, we always tell people to keep the baby in a warm, dark, and quiet place.
Yep.
It's like I just drill that. Whenever I talk to kids, I'm always like, say warm, dark, quiet, repeat after me. And those three, if you remember nothing else from this talk, warm, dark, and quiet.
Yep.
And that's it. So it fascinates me. I've had some people call that say it's 80 degrees outside. I don't need to put them in a warm place.
Right.
And it's interesting because that makes sense, and I can see how it makes sense to a lot of people. But
Yeah. We're sweating at 80 degrees.
right,
So why wouldn't they
exactly.
be? Right.
Yeah. And it's. And I try to explain that a lot of these mammals, their body temperature is supposed to be 100. You know, what's a possum's temp supposed to be? 94?
94 to 97.
Yeah, and then you have your foxes that are supposed to be like 101. So their temperatures are supposed to be above 80 degrees.
Right.
And they can't maintain their temperature on their own. So when they're babies, baby mammals. So if their body temperature is 80 degrees, they're severely hypothermic. So even if it's a warm day, 70, 80 degrees, you still want to put them on some heat because they'll be otherwise very hypothermic, and that's not good for them either.
Yep.
And then dark places, because we're trying to create what mom's den feels like, right? So a warm, dark, quiet place would be like what it feels like when they're at home. They're not way out in the open. It's not very loud in nature, so we don't want dogs barking or kids screaming. Which in some houses it's harder to find that peace than in others. You know, it's always hard for me when I'm giving these animals rides. Like if I'm driving them back to the rescue, because I'm like, I can't play my music.
Right.
Sometimes I want to blare some Tool or some Metallica, and I'm like, I can't do it. It's not good for them. So, but then there's the feeders, the people that want to feed them.
Yep.
James kills me every time.
Yeah. I think really quick, going back to warm, dark, and quiet, I will usually try to catch the animals with some sort of a buffer, like a
good
blanket
point.
or towel or something along
Right.
those lines. And then right from there, you can use that as a substrate in whatever you're keeping them in, whether it's like a cardboard box with air holes or like a Tupperware tote kind of a thing. And once you have the animal contained in there with the blanket or towel, whatever kind of substrate it is, with your supplemental heat, which could be, you know, a really hot water bottle that you have a towel or blanket wrapped around. The real test is if it's too hot for you, it's way too hot for them.
Good point. Good point.
And so once you have this animal contained in this bin, cardboard box, whatever, like you said, you want them to be quiet. So oftentimes I'll tell people, you know, if you can put them into the garage or put them into a closet on the other side of the house where you guys aren't existing, making a lot of sounds and
Right.
that type of a thing, then the baby will be a lot more comfortable until they're able to get to us.
Right. And that's a great point too with the barrier too. Not only because you can use it for a substrate for the animal, but for your own protection too. Some of these animals could have diseases or parasites or things like that. So if you can keep that separation, wearing gloves or using blankets or something like that, it's better for you. It's better for them.
Yeah.
I can't believe I forgot that. Such an important part, the safety part, right? Yeah. And we ask people not to feed them. And I feel like people think we're trying to hog all the fun.
Yeah, because we're big old meanies.
We're big old meanies. We're like, we want to feed it. We've got 20 other squirrels here to feed. But I think it's so important to let people know why, because it doesn't make sense. Like, why on earth, if they aren't able to drop it off for another few hours, like, why on earth wouldn't we feed this starving baby? And what I try and explain to people is, so many things have to be right for their body to digest. So many things have to be right. And if they truly are an orphan, there's a good chance they've not seen mom in days.
Yeah.
You know, who knows? I doubt you found it the minute that it lost its parents. They're often very dehydrated, hypothermic, and very underweight. We have to address so many things before food is an option. You know, an animal that's hypothermic, its body's literally doing everything it can to stay alive.
Yep.
All of its energy, the little bit of energy it has, is being on breathing and keeping its heart going. And when we feed them and we stimulate that digestive process, now they're having to convert energy to try to digest, and they don't have enough.
Right.
They don't have enough energy. So you can actually kill an animal by feeding it when it's hypothermic. And if it's dehydrated, let's say it's not hypothermic, but we're feeding it and it's very dehydrated. Well, a lot of times the body will pull water into the intestines to help digest things properly. And if the animal's severely dehydrated, it doesn't have any fluid to pull into the intestines. So they can't properly digest.
Yep.
So we can cause severe issues by doing that, this domino effect. And even water. Even water, we don't want to offer that unless we know the temperature's normal, that they're normal. And then also if you don't have the correct equipment to offer them that food. Like with raccoons, sometimes we have to tube them when they first come in because they won't take a bottle. And the squirrels, they want to aspirate so bad when you're feeding them. It's so hard to get a squirrel to take water or formula without aspirating if you don't have the proper tools, if you don't have the experience. And also, some of them, when they come in, are so compromised, we can't even give them anything orally because they're not swallowing properly. And if you don't swallow properly, stuff can go. When I say aspirate, I mean the fluid can go in the lungs when it's supposed to go in the stomach. So there are so many things that could go wrong. You're better off I always say, if you can warm that baby up for us, that's huge. Because a lot of times when we receive them, we're spending hours just slowly warming them up. If you can bring them to us already warm, we can already start hydrating and working on things. But if you feed that same baby, then we're just trying to mitigate all the damage that could have been done from feeding it.
Yeah. If we receive a cold baby, sometimes they're not even getting food until the following day. Like, even if we were to get this baby in the morning, sometimes they're not getting food until the following day because it takes hours to warm them. Then we have to give fluids under the skin most of the time. The formula is very diluted, all those types of things. So it does take a lot of time.
And it's not because we don't care, because I want to feed them so bad.
Yeah, totally.
Like, I too am like, oh my God, he's got to be so hungry. But you could just mess everything up. And like you said, we're not feeding them really till the next day because we're typically just hydrating and flushing out their system because the formula we're giving them is not exactly the same as mom's. And so there's this whole process where they get very, very diluted formula. And then we slowly increase, I want to say the intensity, but that's not right. The concentration
there you go.
of the formula. So it's definitely a very slow process. And the formula that we're offering too is stuff that we order that's specific for each individual species. So we're not giving everybody cow's milk. No one's getting cow's milk. I need that to be so clear.
They're not baby cows.
Nobody's getting cow's milk. So it's all of those things is why we want people to wait. And I understand why people want to feed them. And most people, if they understood what it did, they wouldn't do it. But they're just trying to help.
Yeah,
so,
totally.
Yeah, it's just getting that information out there.
Yeah.
So I do have a trick for squirrels, and I wanted to address just some specific species.
Mm-hmm.
I've had situations where people are trying to reunite a squirrel with the mom. They see the mom, but the mom just does not see the baby.
Yeah.
And they're frustrated. And the baby's very comfortable because maybe they've put a hot water bottle beside it just so it doesn't get too cold. And it's just perfectly fine sleeping. So mom has no idea it's there. And we've used YouTube. You can go on YouTube and Google, not Google because you're on YouTube, but you can search. You can search baby squirrel call or gray squirrel call, and they've got sounds of the babies crying. And I'm telling you, I want to say 7 out of 10 times when we haven't seen mom, when we use that squirrel call, she will go running.
Yeah.
She will, as long as she feels safe and there's not a person around. So that YouTube squirrel call with the mama squirrels, it has been a real lifesaver many times that I suggest that to people. And then with raccoons, like we were saying before, especially with raccoons, you really want to wear gloves.
Yeah.
Really want to be careful. And it's not that they all have rabies or they all have distemper. But if a person, I don't know if people understand that legally, if that raccoon scratches or bites someone while they're containing it, legally we have to euthanize that animal and test it for rabies. And some people will say, well, why don't you just test it without euthanizing it?
Right.
And well, we need brain matter to test them. And so legally, by law, we have to euthanize that animal. So sometimes we have a baby raccoon that looks perfectly healthy, but someone has let their children play with it or something like that, and it has to be euthanized, unfortunately. And so I really want to stress that when you are handling these animals for their safety and for your safety, just wear gloves and don't lie if you were scratched or bitten, because it's very
big
serious.
deal.
Rabies
Yeah.
is a serious thing. But also, let's take rabies and distemper out of the whole thing. A lot of raccoons, even babies, carry Bayless scars. I'm probably not pronouncing it correctly, but it's a raccoon roundworm. And it can be deadly to other animals. Raccoons live fine with it, but it can be deadly to other animals, and it can be very toxic to people. It can migrate past the intestines into the brain. It's a serious thing, so you don't want to be handling them without gloves, because if you get this parasite in your system somehow, that's very bad too. So you definitely want to be cautious with them. And there's rabbits. We should discuss the rabbits, James.
All of the rabbits.
There'll be so many rabbits this
So
baby
many.
season. Yeah.
Maybe some from me if my dogs like to disturb their nests, which they love to do.
That's
but
right. You
that's
did
okay.
bring us some rabbits last year.
I did.
That's right.
Yep.
Yeah. It usually ends up being dogs.
Yeah. Typically.
It's crazy. And people will come, it's like the same scenario every time where they're so upset with their dog.
Yeah.
You know? And they never thought a bunny nest would be there because it's like in the middle of the yard.
Yep.
Not under a bush. In plain sight, just a little divot in the ground, and there's the nest. And the dogs get so excited when they find it. And a lot of people have no idea that it was even there. And it's okay. It's not the dog's fault. It happens. But usually what we try to do is, if we can, cover the nest back up using what mom used. So she would use her fur and dead grass. So you'll see clumps of fur and grass. And if you can put those back over the babies, and then when you let your dog out, I always suggest, if you can't put the dog on a leash, if they need to be able to roam in your backyard, then you can stake down a laundry basket over the hole while your dog's out to keep them away from the nest, and then pull the stakes out whenever your dogs go back inside. Because the mama bunny only goes with the cottontails. They only go to their babies 2 times a day, typically. Sometimes only 1 time per day.
Yeah.
So people would be like, they're definitely abandoned. I have not seen a rabbit. I'm like, well, she's only going to come a lot of times early in the morning, and then right as the sun's going down, she's going to be there for like 5 minutes tops.
She's quick.
It's minimal care. Care. These guys, terrible mothers. But they do well on it. So there's a good chance you're not going to see mom.
Right.
We say sometimes to put, you could even put floss or something over the nest in a tic-tac-toe pattern and check the next day to see if that floss has been moved at all, because that could be an indication that mom came back. If you're worried that she's not coming back, the floss definitely works. And we have, I have videos of this on our website at newhousewildliferescue.org on how to handle it when you found a squirrel or if you found a baby bunny, with video to help to explain it all better too. So But there's possums too. That's always complicated, right? Because they're the only marsupials that we have
Right.
in the U.S. So what should people do if they find a dead possum on the side of the road?
So if you find a dead possum on the side of the road, you have to think of your safety first. So
True.
don't pull over on the side of the highway and check a possum pouch. We cannot endorse that. If you do that on your own, that is your choice. But basically, you would always want to wear gloves because mom's pouch is full of yucky bacteria that we don't want to be exposed to. And so when her pouch is full of babies, you're typically going to be able to tell. If the babies are still alive, they're going to be, and they're kind of on the larger side, they'll be wiggling around inside the pouch, all those types of things. If you are certain that the possum's dead, you don't necessarily even need to touch the possum. You could just use kind of a stick and turn the possum over and see even if the possum does have a pouch. And then if the possum does have a pouch, that's when you can do some further investigation. And if there are babies inside, we would not recommend you try to remove the babies, but bring us the whole possum if possible. And if you can get past how
Carrying it
distasteful
dead.
that is.
Yeah,
right.
You'd be surprised. A lot of people will do it. They
Yeah.
will. And it's awful. It's awful to witness what happened to mom. But if we could save, sometimes the babies get thrown from the pouch
Yeah.
too, because, hit by a car. But absolutely everything James said. And with not removing them from the pouch, I don't think people realize that the mom's teat is way in the back of their throat.
Yeah.
It's not like they're connected to mom. And it's not like you're just pulling babies that aren't connected at all out of
Right.
a pouch. They're very much connected, and removing their mouths from mom's teat is a slow process. Depending on how old the babies are, they can't unlatch.
Right.
Their mouths are sealed shut,
Yep.
except for this tiny hole in the front, which blew my mind because
Yeah.
no one ever told me that when I was first learning. It's
Gotcha.
like, cats and dogs have sealed shut eyes when they're born.
Yeah.
And so seeing the possums with their eyes shut, fine. But when you're trying to feed one and you're like, where its mouth is sealed shut. So
Yep.
it's definitely easier if you could take mom completely and bring her to a wildlife rehabber. And I always also like to tell people that some people are like, I don't know if I'm seeing a pouch or I'm missing a pouch. The males have blue testicles. I'm just going to put that out there. It's the truth. They're
Yeah.
like blue.
Yeah.
Like it's the craziest thing. So if you're not sure about a pouch, I think most people can identify what blue testicles look like. So
Yep.
that's one way to know. Because if you see them, then you know you're good. There's no
Yep.
babies that need help. Definitely, yeah. They're a little bit more complicated because they're marsupials. So mom can be dead, and the babies could still have survived the ordeal.
Right.
Whereas with a pregnant mammal, it wouldn't be the case. So let's talk turtles.
Yeah.
Let's talk turtles. I learned a lot about turtles from you this year that I never desired to know, but now I do find fascinating. So
You're welcome.
Yeah, so you can't really talk about finding orphaned turtles, right?
Right. So any kind of reptile that we have here, or any reptile in general, they're completely independent from mom once they hatch, predominantly hatch. Some reptiles give live birth, but that is not something that happens here. So they lay the eggs hatch, and then the babies are completely independent and just go on their own way. And the eggs, in terms of timing of when you can see them, oftentimes they'll lay around May. They'll start to lay around May, and it can vary depending on the weather how quickly the eggs hatch. So the incubation period can range quite a bit. It can be up to 150 days. But besides that,
They just dig a hole
yeah.
in people's yards, these
Yep.
turtles.
Yeah.
Like I've heard people tell me, like, I can't believe it's just on the side of my house or whatever. Just
Yep.
and that's it. That's like mom's job.
Yep.
And then they're just completely, when they hatch, they're just on their own. Mom's like,
Yep.
whatever.
Mom's done.
No idea how they ever did. No concern.
None.
Just done. It's crazy. So if you ever see a baby turtle, they're not orphaned.
Nope, not orphaned. They're just ready to live their best life. It will be the season soon where we start to see a lot of turtles that have been hit by a car. And if the turtle is confirmed deceased, you can still bring that turtle to some wildlife rehabilitators. Definitely call ahead and see if the wildlife rehabilitator is comfortable doing something like this. But we have done egg salvage procedures this year, a few of them, and we've been able to take those eggs and incubate them in an artificial incubator that we created. And
so I don't know if you understand what an
turtles.
egg salvage procedure. You sound so smart. When I talk, I'm always like, so what we're gonna do is we're taking eggs from dead turtles and saving them. Like it's insane.
Yeah.
Like you've told me about that, and I'm like, how? What?
Yep.
It's crazy.
And another fun little tidbit that I love about that is that depending on the temperature that you keep those eggs will dictate the sex of the turtle as well.
What?
Yeah,
So if it's a little bit warmer, they could all be female?
correct.
Wow.
And then if it's cooler, they're more often to be male turtles.
So will all the eggs in that group hatch always the same sex?
I would say typically yes. There is some variability, but where the nests are so close, the nests aren't spread out by like 5 feet or so. They're kind of
Okay.
concentrated,
Yeah.
similar to like a rabbit nest where all the eggs are kind of in this one little spot.
One spot, yeah.
So there's not a whole lot of temperature variation within that small spot because it's not like a large enough surface area.
Huh.
But if you had a bunch of turtle nests in like one specific field, if there's shade covering certain portions of those are going to stay cooler than ones that have full sun exposure. All those types of things will all
So
be
crazy.
variables that will dictate the sex of the
Craziness.
turtles.
So if you see turtles making a nest, leave it be. Leave a
Yep.
nest be. And if you see baby turtles, they're not orphans. But if you see a turtle that got hit by a car that has eggs, which you might know because it was just hit by a car, so maybe you can see, maybe you can't.
Yep.
But we could potentially harvest, egg salvage procedure.
Yep.
The eggs. So that's really interesting. And we did get a lot of eggs last year.
Yeah.
That was really neat and gross watching you dig through turtle carcasses to save babies. And it was it was fascinating to watch and gross. And then I just want to say that it was really gross. But then to see when you came and they'd all hatched.
Yeah.
That was insane because the last time I had thought about that was seeing you diving into a carcass, moving pieces of shell apart to pull out eggs, and then it became this beautiful these tiny little lives that were all squirming. It was so fascinating. So I guess both possums and turtles, if the mom is deceased, there's still a chance if the babies are with the parent, but any other baby, obviously.
One thing I will say about turtles' nests really quickly is that the turtles don't care where they lay their nests. So it will often be in areas that are not the most ideal for us. Sometimes they'll be in our yard in a place where maybe like your kids have a swing set or a jungle gym or something along those lines. And when that type of a thing happens, if the nest was laid very recently, you can take those eggs and move them, but I would say to contact a wildlife rehabilitator to take on those eggs. I would not try to necessarily move them yourself. After the first couple of days, this is getting a little bit more nerdy than what I wanted to delve into.
Oh, come on. You wanted to get nerdy.
Yeah. Bird eggs need to be rotated if anybody hatches their own chickens, etc. Bird eggs need to be rotated, but turtle eggs and reptile eggs should not be rotated. After the first couple of days, the egg basically kind of solidifies in the spot where it needs to be, and so rotating it can actually kill the egg, essentially. So if it's freshly laid and it's in a spot where it will be trampled or something along those lines, you can contact a wildlife rehabilitator, and some of us will come out and move the nest, or will tell you how to kind of move the nest. I had some people that had nests that were, right next to their parking spot, and they were gonna probably run the nest over.
Right.
And so they literally just brought me a 5-gallon Home Depot bucket full of mulch and eggs.
Oh my God.
And so
yeah, and rabbits will do that too. Sometimes the people will show me where the nest was, and I'm like, how? I saw one. It was in between 2 lanes of traffic.
I love that.
Like, how that the median where there's a little bit of grass sometimes. I'm like, what possessed mom to do this?
Yeah.
They just don't know sometimes. One thing we totally forgot to mention is this big myth about mom not taking the babies back.
Yes.
If they smell like people.
Yes.
Now, we also did say, don't be touching them with your bare hands, but also you don't have to worry about your scent being on them and the parent not coming back. That's such a myth. And that breaks my heart when people say that they didn't try to reunite because they know mom wouldn't come because it smelled like people, or because their dog brought it to them. Maybe it smelled like their dog. And then that reminds me of birds, and we didn't discuss fledglings.
Yep.
Fledglings are a big problem every baby season, where people are like, this baby bird needs help.
Yep.
It can't fly. It doesn't have full feathers, so a lot of times they'll have some feathers, but mostly the down feathers, little fuzzy looking things. And so often these babies are kidnapped. And I understand why, because they totally look, they're very helpless.
Yeah,
They
totally.
can't fly, and they're out there in the open. But they learn to fly from the ground. So it's very, very normal to see a baby bird on the ground trying to figure out how to fly. They are the most vulnerable at that age. They totally are. This is when outdoor cats are getting them and other predator species. But it is very natural. If you're worried the baby's orphaned, parents are feeding the baby like every half hour to an hour.
Yep.
So all you got to do is monitor.
Right.
But you can't monitor like once every 5 minutes because you might not see, you really want to watch. But if they're not orphaned, you'll see mom or dad coming down and feeding them frequently. So that's one thing I always ask everybody to do, is not to grab it, not to take it away from his parents. Baby birds are a lot of work. Yeah. Then we spend like every half hour all day as soon as the sun comes up until the sun goes down. Like it's insane. Don't make someone do that if they don't have to.
I would say too, watch from a distance. Don't hover around the baby, because that will make the parents not come and feed the baby. Then it will just, artificially look like the parents have abandoned them, when really the parents may be looking from a tree in the distance because they see us, this big, large, scary predator.
That's a great point.
Guarding their baby.
So when we say a distance, what should we say? Because some people might think 5 feet is a distance. I would say like 30 feet or more.
I'd say like 25, 30, somewhere around there. Or if you stand on a patio or have a 4-season porch or something, like if you're standing looking out a window, then they don't see you, and you can still observe and that kind of stuff.
Agreed.
So you might be able to get closer to the animal without actually being outside, and I think that would probably be the most ideal.
That makes sense too. Awesome. Well, that's a ton of information. I hope people found that helpful.
I do have one other fun little amphibian, what to do if you find baby amphibians, kind of. So frogs start out as frog spawn, which then go into tadpoles, which then go into frogs. And so frogs really love to lay their eggs in people's pool covers right before they open their pool for the season. And that's because all of that is rainwater. So it is something that's not chlorinated, all that kind of stuff. It just seems like fresh water to them. And so if that happens, you can take a 5-gallon Home Depot bucket. They should sponsor us. Second time I've mentioned it. And just kind of scoop a bunch of that pool water, or that water in the pool lid, into the bucket, and scoop the eggs into the bucket. And you can sometimes find different rehabilitators to take those eggs and hatch them into tadpoles and then frogs. And then
that would be fun.
Yeah.
I would totally
I can't wait for that to happen. I'm hoping it happens this year.
It just can't happen at our facility because Tiny, that works for us, is terrified of frogs, like super, super terrified. Like,
would be her literal nightmare.
It would. Even the tiniest frog, she will wrestle an angry raccoon, no problem. But a tiny frog, we'll have to see. We'll have to see. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for listening. This was awesome. And please Please subscribe. I don't know how podcast things work, but whatever you got to do, subscribe, like it, comment on it, share it with all your friends, and let them know. And thank you so much for listening.